Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our West Midlands Hub afternoon. We've titled it COVID-19, what have we learned and where are we now? It was discussions that we had back in about October on what our next hub event would be. And that was obviously even the second lockdown. And even more has happened obviously since then, as we're on our third lockdown now, and just coming out of it, thankfully. So we've all faced professional and personal challenges during this time, but there have been some positive impacts about the way in which we've worked, and we thought it'd be great to have something positive to talk about today and future planning wise, so that we can all share those things with each other, because you hear so many negative thoughts. It's nice to have something positive to focus on. There's some housekeeping things just to go over. I think we'll see a slide in a minute detailing some of those. So if you want to change your name, you can click the three dots on yourself, either your video or participants, and include your name and organisation, because that functions as your actual badge. And just a gentle reminder that we will be recording today's presentation, as we would like to place it on the YouTube Royal College video site, so that people who haven't been able to come today can actually still see it, which is great for getting it out into the West Midlands. You can use the chat function at any point of the day. Please do. You can either chat to everybody if you want to make a comment, whatever that may be, and you can also chat to specific people, either presenters or Kaylee, who, if you've got any technical issues or anything like that, she'll be able to assist with that, or any problems. There's a message from Kaylee. You don't need to turn your camera on, as many of you haven't anyway. Obviously, if you don't want to, if you want to be seen, that's absolutely fine. And obviously, you don't have to contribute in any way. If you don't want to, you can just sit and listen. That's fine as well. You can actually leave and re-enter the event at any time using the same link if you need to. But we have scheduled in several breaks so that we've got time to pop out. When you do pop out, you can turn your camera and audio off, so obviously no one can hear or see what you're doing, but please don't go out of the room. I will remind you of this because we will be going into breakout rooms later on, so we'll need that over the break times. If you want to tweet, please do so again. The Twitter tag is at West Mid RCSLT Hub. Kaylee will probably pop it into the chat anyway for me, so that you can tweet. That would be great. Lastly, are we having an evaluation, Kaylee? Have we got that set up? Yeah. So we've got obviously an evaluation to complete at the end of the afternoon, and Kaylee will post a link for that. And that'd be great if as many people can do that as possible, because obviously we do plan these events at least annually, if not biannually, and it's great if you know, we can actually get your feedback to what you want, because this is for you. This is for the West Midlands speech and language therapy cohort and assistants, so it's nice to hear feedback. So just a little bit about the hub, just quickly. Obviously you'll meet some of our hub members. We have about around 12 people in our hub group that regularly attend meetings that we have a few times a year, and we're made up from lots of different professional backgrounds and disciplines. We sometimes have students, assistants, we have NQPs occasionally, and then obviously therapists working in different settings. And it's always great to have more people in the hub group. You can contribute as little as much to a hub as possible. Event planning, project work, and just being a communication link to trusts, so that we can disseminate and distribute information. So there will be a link if you want to get more involved with the hub at some point during the afternoon. Okay, well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kamini Gadhok, and I'm sure you all know Kamini. She is the CEO at Royal College, and she'll be talking today about the response and impact from the Royal College's perspective. Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much, Michelle. And thanks, Kaylee, for showing up such a glamorous photo of me on the slide. I can reassure you I have more wrinkles than that shows. Anyway, it's lovely to meet you all virtually, and great opportunity to have a chance to talk to you today. So I'll be asking Kaylee to help me to share the slide. So if I say next slide, Kaylee will move on. So as the slide shows, that's who I am. I am a speech therapist by professional background, actually qualified from Manchester University in 1983 and worked in Wolverhampton for my first year. So and was actually brought up in Nottingham, and I went back to Nottingham and worked there as a speech therapist for about 14 years before I became a general manager. So I am a Midlander, so to speak. So nice to see you all, as I said, virtually. So moving on then, I was asked to really give a bit of an overview of what we've been doing. And I think you all know last March, well, gosh, it was a bit of a shock, wasn't it, that we were in a situation where we were facing a global pandemic. At that time, as it says, we didn't really know what that meant, and there were so many unknowns. All we knew was that the Prime Minister had announced a national lockdown, and that was at the end of last March last year, and really.
Sorry, everyone. I think Kaminy's experiencing some technical difficulties, but she should be back in just a minute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Don't you just love technology when it fails? Apologies, my computer crashed. So I'm now on my iPad. So apologies, I'm now holding my iPad. I shall just put it down. So hopefully you can still see me. Is that okay? Yep. So as I said, we were, our main concern was responding to your needs. And what I love about the profession is that you're very good at communicating with us. And we found that you were letting us know through social media, through contacting the inquiries team, as well as through emails, that, that there was a real concern, particularly in the first instance around PPE for those members working in hospitals and working in intensive care, in particular with patients who are coming in with COVID-19. So as you can imagine, our response was to be both reactive and then proactive, but working with our members to prioritise what was really essential. And as a result, we've set up the COVID-19 advisory group. And in fact, we had a meeting of that group this morning, and that includes speech therapists from around the UK. And we've sort of broadened that group out. So anyone who particularly wants to join and help us with co-producing guidance or resources, but also giving us some feedback on what's happening, they've been very active in helping to develop some of the things I'm going to talk about next. So if Kaylee wants to move on to the next slide, that would be great. So as I said, the initial priority was really looking at guidance around PPE, and we started off thinking it was going to be a one-pager. It's turned into over 30 pages of guidance, and I've been heavily involved in helping to draft this. As I said to members last year, well, we've never been through a pandemic before, so I might not have all the answers, but together we can work them through. So what we have done is, over time, as things changed and altered, and as they continue to change and alter, is we've worked with all of you to update the guidance in light of either changes to scientific evidence or changes to, for example, the reopening of services and what that might mean enable you to do your work, but in a safe way. So we have a lot of this now on the RCSLT COVID-19 Hub, and it also includes the evidence base and the research that is being developed about what we know with respect to COVID-19. And what we are doing is sharing that knowledge and that information through the webinars. And we've had a series of those on COVID-19 in particular. I think the first one, which we put together probably within a week, which is unheard of for us in terms of trying to turn around an event that quickly. But we had over 1,000 people who listened in internationally. So, you know, Kaylee's got all the schools on the door, so to speak, but we are doing very well in terms of turning these around and getting, I suppose, in terms of access, because they are webinars and they're recorded for people to be able to download and listen to them as and when they need. There's also an opportunity through that hub to join the discussion forum to really get peer-to-peer support. So I think it's really important, as we say, you know, we're on a journey together, we're learning. And in fact, this morning, what was very interesting talking to members about the clinical presentation of patients with COVID-19 is seeing that there is now a change in what they're seeing, both in terms of the demography, so much younger patients coming in with more severe needs and needing to be in intensive care for longer. Also, women who are pregnant, which is obviously not a good thing. So, and Great Ormond Street have just managed to secure some funding to look at long COVID within children. So there's a lot yet we're still learning and need to reflect on. Next slide, please, Kaylee. Thank you. So I mentioned that, you know, we worked very much listening to our members about what was essential. And one of the other things that was really important early on was redrafting RCSLT professional guidance, clinical guidance on procedures that were considered higher risk. So again, working with our experts to redraft these to make sure that if you were undertaking any of these procedures with your patients, that you did so in the context of the risks around COVID in particular. And the other thing was really working with all of you to look at how to support you with delivering care differently. So the telehealth guidance has been really important in providing that overview, but also really important information around following GDPR when you're using telehealth to provide care. We know it's been a really new area of work, and I think the reflection and learning from the NHS is that we've probably leapfrogged in decades in terms of using telehealth, because we've been very slow at it, I know, within the public sector. But we know that it's not the panacea for everything, and I'll come on to that in a minute. So here's a list of some of the other things we've done. Obviously, workforce and redeployment was really important. We're very aware that members, speech therapists, are still being redeployed now. And we were very concerned that redeployment happens in the context of using your clinical skills to best effect, whilst also protecting those services and patients who might be missing out because of local or national lockdowns and restrictions in service access. Next slide, please. So, as I said, we do a lot of work behind the scenes, really, to try and think about how government is looking at workforce, for example, as one of the key areas. As you can maybe recall, last year there was a big push on setting up nightingales, and we were asked to get involved in describing and articulating in detail the role of speech therapists with those centres. We were also asked to consider how speech therapists could use their roles in different ways as part of that. Towards the end of last year, I was really concerned hearing from members about capacity and burnout. You know, as we know, you can't knit a speech therapist overnight, and some of the roles that are required within intensive care and critical care are ones that are quite complex to develop. So we have been pushing for financial support to be available for all AHPs, particularly in the context of being able to employ support worker roles who could be brought in more quickly. Again, going back to capacity, it's been really important to us that we raise concerns about well-being of the profession to government and to local employers. We know that there is a lot that's being made available. The issue is, however, the time for all of you to access it. And that came up again as a theme today when we spoke to some of our members. I mentioned earlier about the unintended consequences for non-COVID-19 patients due to services being stopped and staff being redeployed. That's something that is an ongoing, I guess, message. So how we deal with that is something that we're going to need to support all of you with, we know, as we go forward. Next slide, please, Kaylee. Thank you. So the other thing we've been doing is working with the National Association of Head Teachers. We had tried and failed on a number of occasions last year to engage government around consistency of guidance for schools and for those working in schools with respect to understanding routes of transmission and getting appropriate and consistency of approach, including on how speech therapists in schools are working, and also how, you know, if you go into a school, and at the time last year it was all about bubbles, that you might be breaking a bubble, or bursting a bubble, as you might say. So they've been very grateful that we've been working with them, and we are looking to continue some of that work as we go forward. We also have a wider campaign with other stakeholders, and the RCN and the BMA are now heavily involved, and they're taking more of a lead because I guess they have a bigger voice than we have, which is fine, around understanding of the transmission of COVID-19 as the science is showing and highlighting that it is airborne. Going back to our original campaign, though, was about the fact that our members do undertake what we would say are aerosol generating procedures, particularly around dysphagia assessments. And we have been successful in securing a speech therapist to attend the NIHR AGP task and finish group, which is fantastic. That's really good. And I was told by the man who chairs that group that we were asked, particularly because of the paper that our members managed to get published last year in the International Journal. So fantastic leadership from the profession has resulted in that request. So that's fantastic. And then the other bit that I just wanted to share was that we're working with the Community Rehabilitation Alliance to influence government policy and also funding around capacity and workforce for rehab, both for COVID-19 and non-COVID-19 patients. So that's really positive. Thank you. I'm aware of time, so I shall try and move quickly. So there are lots of other things that we've been doing. We've been obviously looking at the impact of COVID-19 on placement education for students. You're really important to us, as are all our members, you know, moving into how we can support you in being able to have a placement in a safe way. And that's something that we're continuing to work on. We've been undertaking surveys of members, and there's a recent wellbeing survey that we conducted, and we're just analysing that at the moment, again, to see how we can use the results of that to help support all of you in your local situation. The other thing that we did to respond to COVID-19 was listening to our members about the importance of data collection as part of this new virus, and understanding how it impacts on people. So we have developed a data collection process using our current online tool that we have, the RCSLT online outcomes tool. So that's been further developed so that you can collect data on patients with COVID-19. And that's been, again, a really positive thing for us to be able to support the profession with. And you can see there's been an article that was published using that data. So that's fantastic, really good. Thank you. Next slide, that's great. I mentioned about patients who have been missing out. We know that it's really important that we look at how we support all of you to restore services. I'm really grateful to the many of you who are on this call who've been sharing your innovative practice through social media and through meetings. It's really important that we do that at the moment. We're particularly concerned about health inequalities. We know there are many patients who cannot access telehealth because of digital poverty, digital literacy, or because of their access issues due to other needs, particularly communication difficulties. So that's something that we're really keen to really look at in terms of how do we support safe restoration of services, and for those populations who've missed out, to help them either where it's children to catch up, or to see what we need to do if they've they've actually got more significant needs. We know that, for example, patients who've had a stroke were turning up later into hospital, and we're hearing that other patients with neurodevelopmental problems are also finding it hard or have had difficulties with access. So these are all things that we're looking at. In terms of vaccinations, we've been very involved, again, behind the scenes, working with government to make sure that people do get access to vaccines who work within the system, not just those who are employed directly by the NHS, but particularly our colleagues who work within independent sector and are employed in other employment contexts. And we're very grateful to all of you for bearing with us while we've managed to work some of those things out. So I'm hoping that you're all having access to vaccinations. I also want to mention the long COVID survey, which was launched recently, and it closes fairly soon on the 10th of March. So I really want you to complete that. If you haven't already looked at it, please can you? That would be fantastic, because it's really important that we get the information that's in that survey and we can use it to support you going forward. Next slide, please, Kaylee. So, and then COVID isn't the only thing we're doing, and COVID restoration services. We've lots of other work underway. I particularly wanted to highlight the work we're doing on diversity, inclusion. And if you go onto the Anti-Racism Hub, you'll see what we've been working on there. We have an event coming up in May, and there's some reading. If you have time, I hope you get a chance to have a look at some of the information on there. There's some little video clips actually, which are easier to absorb, and they're quite short. So hopefully if you've got a few minutes, you can start watching those. I do hope you get a chance to do that. We're also working very closely with our SENs to see how we can support them. And we've just recently launched a competency framework to look at how we support the students of the future to develop their competencies in supporting patients with eating, drinking, swallowing needs. So that's all very new stuff. And next slide, please, Kaylee. Thank you. So I mentioned about resilience, wellbeing and self-care, and we're very aware of the importance of supporting you. So we put together some resources on our website, so you can have a look at those if you get a chance. There's a lot of information, so we are keen that you find the things that are really relevant for you and access those. And finally, but not it's not the only thing that I want to end on, is that we are working with members to look at how we support all of you to develop your leadership skills. And we're going to be having a leadership webinar in the next few months. So there's a lot going on, as you can tell, behind the scenes. And also, we hope that by hearing about some of this, you'll get involved and you'll tell us what else you need help with so that we can respond appropriately. So thank you so much for listening. I think that's all there is from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kamini. That was a really great insight into what Royal College does, because obviously I'm a member of the England Hub Forum, and you get to hear so much that goes on by attending the meetings, and I don't think everybody always knows all the hard work that goes on behind the scenes. So that was brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm going to now hand over to Megan, who's going to do some more introductions for you.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to see so many of you here today. I'd like to welcome our first presenter of this afternoon, someone that I know very well. It is Emma Jordan, who is our Joint Service Lead in Worcestershire NHS Speech and Language Therapy for Children. So Emma, whenever you are ready, over to you.
Thank you very, very much, Meg. We've only got 15 minutes, so I'm going to get straight into slide 1. We're going to tell you about what we've been up to in the last year. So here we are with the Children's Speech and Language Therapy Service in Worcestershire. We're a team of around about 85 of us, therapists, our wonderful assistant practitioners and our admin team, obviously working across quite a large rural county. We're a balanced system service. We've worked with Marie Gascoigne in partnership with Marie for the last 10 years, and we adopt a whole system approach. So we're very much about looking at working together with other people to meet children's speech, language and communication needs, and doing that where the children are. So we go where the children are. We work in children's centres, we visit children at home, we see them in their early year settings, and we see school-age children in their schools. So the impact of COVID, well, obviously, all of us have felt the impact of COVID. So we've been dealing with the impact just generally in terms of what a pandemic does to our local families, our communities and our team. Obviously, one of the biggest impacts has been our face-to-face delivery of services that was disrupted last year. Our partnership working, which is so crucially important to us, that became virtual for a period of time as well last year. And children's access to that consistent regular intervention was reduced because of our inability to provide all of that as we were moving through the pandemic, and because of the change and the impact on schools and settings. We obviously moved some of our support to home as well for children when they weren't attending school. And we've done a lot more work online. We've done more individual rather than group work, unless we've been working in bubbles. And it's definitely had an impact on those children who are going through transition. So those children who started school in September last year, the children about to start school in September this year, the year 6 children from last year who moved into year 7 who would usually attend transition groups with us, and the year 11 children who left school. It had a huge impact on those children going through those transition times and the kind of support that we would typically offer. And there have been physical limitations as well for our own staff. So for instance, how we access our office, how we access all of our resources, that has had practical implications for us in terms of delivery. So if we can just go back one slide, Kaylee, that would be great. We've also saw a huge impact on our referral information, so our referrals coming in. So as you can see in Q1 of 2021, so that's going back to April, May, June of last year, our referrals dramatically went down by 60%. And there were late referrals in. We've recovered, by the time we've got to the end of quarter 3, I think we were around about 17% of our referrals down over the course of the 3 quarters. But we were very concerned about the numbers of children coming in and children not being identified early enough. Okay, so what did we get up to? So from March through to April last year, we were working very closely in partnership with our families, our schools and settings. We opened a phone line and we launched a new parent page on our website on the first day of lockdown. We were asked to do this piece of work and we called it Getting Through COVID-19 as part of a redeployment project. We redeployed so many hours from across the service to support that. And we opened a phone line just for any family who were vulnerable, or any family with any concern of any child who was struggling at that time, and we were offering advice to those families. We moved all of our drop-ins for early years. They all moved online. They weren't in our children's centres anymore. We developed lots of resources and advice, and we put that across all of our websites and across social media. And we had lots of lovely walking challenges on a daily basis, because the only thing that we were allowed to do, it felt like at the time, was go for a walk. And we moved all of our service delivery. By April, we'd moved online. So we had some internal training, we wrote our policy, and we developed lots of resources to help us to move online. And by April, we were seeing children online. And we also developed home learning packs for families so that they could support children with the interventions that would typically be delivered at school or in their setting at home instead. So that was March through to April. And then from June through to July and August. In June, there's a little image that should be in that corner there that's missing. We were really concerned about our referrals. So we produced a series of identification tools for parents, flagging up when to be concerned in early years, and trying to encourage parents to refer children in themselves or to make contact with us. All of our online training and our language for learning training moved online, and we offered lots of refresher courses. We had hundreds of people coming to those across our schools and settings in June and July time. We developed our YouTube channel and put lots of practical advice for families onto YouTube. And we also recorded some webinars for families to accompany the home learning packs. And then, working very closely with Royal College, we wrote our PPE policy and got that signed off in July, ready to resume some of our face-to-face services in August. So we trialled that in August to get ready for September. And in August, we also carried out a big piece of work offering, these were online appointments for all of the children due to start school in September who were known to us, so that we could identify their core needs and what interventions they might need, ready for when they started in reception. And our year 6 and year 11 transition support, that moved to a home-based support package, and we developed that for families to use with support online and by telephone as well, because we couldn't do our groups face to face. Okay. And then from September, we were all really happy because we were back in our schools and our settings. We had our PPE, and from the 1st of September, we resumed our face-to-face appointments in all of our early years work in our children's centres, still not doing groups, still not running our talking, walk-in, stay and play sessions, but we were back to face-to-face work. We shared our PPE policy with all of our partners in schools. We produced a lovely poster so that everyone was clear about what we were doing so that we could practice safely. And we really prioritised those children that we'd not been able to see face-to-face or online, and those hard to reach families and communities. So that work continued all through September through to December. We had some very late referrals then coming in, so children who'd really missed out on that support through early years. And some children that we saw in that period of time had made good progress. They'd responded really well to the intervention and the support that they'd been receiving either at school through school support or through their home learning work. But many children hadn't. Older children and definitely children who are harder to reach, or children who just hadn't had that support at home during that period of time. So then in January, well, we were still back out there. Obviously, we've had some restrictions because of the lockdown, but we've continued with our face-to-face appointments, and we've continued our work in schools, obviously restricted by the numbers of children in school. So we have had to increase our online work for some children. And we're now planning ahead for the summer, thinking about how we can work in our schools during the summer holiday time, and some of our schools are willing to open for us so that we can see some children and support some of those transitions. And we're already planning for our school starters for 2021 in terms of what we might be able to offer them over the summer before they start in reception. Okay, so next one. So finally, there's still much for us to do as we continue to respond, and we're working through our recovery plan. We've learnt, we already knew the value of our working relationships, but oh my goodness, have we appreciated them. Our work in partnership with our families and our colleagues in settings and schools, it's really supported us all the way through. And the balanced system approach has really proven to be robust in terms of underpinning our response and thinking about what we're offering in the midst of the pandemic. Moving forward, we're a rural county. I think we will continue with some meetings online, and I think we will move some of our phone contact we've done online in the future. However, we can't wait to be back fully face to face, standing and working alongside all of our amazing colleagues in our settings and schools, because that's where we know we can really make change happen and make a difference for children in terms of their skills. Okay, I think the next slide is just our information. I think we might have caught up a little bit as well in terms of time. So you can find us online, that's our website. Everything's there for you to download if you'd like to download any of our resources and see what we've been up to. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and you'll find us on other social media and on YouTube, and there's more information there about the balance system if you'd like it. Thank you very much for asking us to share what we've been up to. It's been a busy year.
Thank you, Emma. It's busy to say the least. Yeah, thank you for that insight. There's so much to be proud of, so much to carry on doing, and I think lots to reflect on. But yeah, we've had a few comments about resources. Everything is, say, on our website. Please feel free to go and have a look. Identification tools, resources to support settings and families. The more we can do, the better. Okay, I'll now hand over to Gillian Rudd, who I think is going to introduce our next presenters.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks, Emma. As you know, what we've tried to do today is reflect a range of different perspectives and experiences. So the next presentation that we have is from Birmingham City University, and we have with us Victoria Lundy, who is a senior lecturer and joint course lead for the BSc programme, and Claire Johnston, who is a lecturer and placements lead for the BSc course. So handing over to you, Victoria and Claire, to talk about the university perspective.
Hi everyone, I'm Victoria Lundy, as Gillian says, joint course lead for the BSc programme. Claire's there.
Yeah, I'm here. I can't see you actually, Victoria. But yeah, so I'm Claire Johnston, and I'm sure I've spoken to lots of you at various points regarding our BSc placements for level 5 and level 6, and also lecture on the degree course as well.
So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the course delivery and delivery of the curriculum on campus and how it's evolved over the last 12 months through the various stages of lockdown. Since March last year, the course very quickly moved online and mostly stayed online, and pretty much at the moment we still will be delivering the course online at least until Easter. There's been very short periods of time before Christmas where we did go on to campus, and when we were on campus we delivered via small groups in order to maintain social distancing, but also to maintain small group bubbles, which often for us meant repeating sessions multiple times. All face-to-face teaching had to be risk assessed, and additional PPE put in place, as well as masks. We also used things like perspex screens, which were used for smaller group close contact sessions, for example, exploring clinical assessments. So therefore, from March, staff and students very quickly had to familiarise themselves with use of PPE in the classroom, as well as new technologies such as Microsoft Teams, which I'm sure has become very familiar to a lot of you, as well as ourselves over the last 12 months. It's been our teaching platform, our meeting platform, as well as everything else. And so we had to really make sure everyone was up to speed with these things to ensure that we could deliver the content really effectively, and as well as meet curriculum guidance and learning outcomes for the course and individual modules. We've had to put protocols in place to ensure that the quality and effective teaching, ensure the quality and effectiveness of teaching online. An example of this would be in relation to breakout rooms, for example, in order to maximise student engagement. And these are things that we've been reviewing on an ongoing basis as we've been learning, as we've been going along. We currently also now record online teaching, particularly, for example, for those students who can't always be at sessions at the moment, for example, due to homeschooling commitments. And the complexity of home life for a lot of our students has become even more evident throughout this process. We've had to adapt assessments, such as face-to-face vivas and written exams, so that they could still be delivered really effectively online. And we've worked at a school level within the university to make sure we were problem solving around those sorts of things, so that they could be really effectively delivered still. And in order to reflect the current situation, we've incorporated a much higher level of telehealth teaching into the curriculum. I've worked in line with RCSLT guidance, as well as with other external organisations and clinicians to deliver this at an effective level. And we've identified some really fantastic tools along the way, which are helping students both within the classroom as well as out on their clinical placements. Students have had a really reduced access to physical resources. So, for example, library resources and assessments that are kept in our very, very small SLT resource room. They haven't been able to access that. However, a lot of work has gone into liaising with publishers and the library services to try and make as much resource available online. But we've also worked with placement providers to raise their awareness of this issue, so that they can manage this with us when students go out onto placement. And we've adapted the way that we've delivered things like simulations and OSCEs on campus, so that they are delivered online via telehealth, so that we can get the students used to using assessments and resources in a slightly different way, in line with what's happening out in practice at the moment. For our new starters, it's been particularly challenging. We think it's been hard for them to develop a sense of community with their cohort. Many students are feeling very isolated, either back home with families or in their halls of residence. And there has been increased reports of feeling of isolation and increased number of referrals to our university wellbeing team, which have been fantastic. However, students have been very proactive and innovative in making social and academic links, and we've also tried to initiate lots of activities to promote this as well. For example, regular small tutor group meetings, wellbeing events, etc. And students, you know, they report to us they very much miss the face-to-face contact, but have been incredibly professional, flexible in managing the constant change that's been thrown at us all throughout the last 12 months. And so I think, you know, from a curriculum delivery classroom approach, we've had to respond very quickly, and there's been lots of change. However, there's been a huge amount of positive learning in relation to these changes and embracing new technologies, and it's really made us think about that sort of flipped approach to teaching even more so over the last 12 months. So I'm going to hand over to Claire, and Claire's going to talk a little bit more about placement delivery and the advantages and challenges we've faced.
Okay, so yeah, with regards to placements, when the pandemic first hit, I hadn't actually been in post very long working with placements, so it was a bit of a whirlwind, and we'd got our level 6 students out at the time. Yeah, it was challenging for everybody. We didn't know what was happening. Placements were being suspended because we didn't you know, teams were being redeployed, having to go into lockdown, etc. And this was a new situation that we were having to manage, and we also needed to ensure that student safety was managed as well at the time. However, as the pandemic progressed, we found that that the maintenance of placements, that there was a sort of the balance between the adult and the paediatric placements was being suspended was very different, and I think that was very much reflective of the environment. So schools were closing, which meant that there wasn't the access to the client groups, uncertainty around PPE, etc. Whereas within the adult placement settings, there was the access to the PPE, and there was a sense of that they were able to carry on and manage it as best as possible safely. This did result in some placements being extended, etc. Sort of once placements were able to start resuming for some students. And it really started the ball rolling around innovation with placement provision. And how we sort of look to the models of placement and the usual type of student being there with the clinician, accessing placements, how that model changed to really include a lot more innovation and a variety of type of experiences. And that really started at the end of the first lockdown, where we started to introduce projects for students to complete, where they had a few days of placement left. So they developed a CPD type resource and accessible information around COVID relevant to their client groups. As we sort of progressed through with COVID, placements have naturally evolved with that. And we've been able to work really closely with our providers. The support we've had from our placement providers has been incredible. There's always that panic and that anticipation that we're not going to have enough student placements for our students, but we have been really fortunate that we've been able to place all of our level 5s. Our level 6s have just started their placement. Our MSc students, we had to move one placement date for the MSc students just to start a little bit later in the summer, but all of our students have been able to access their clinical placements, and that's through the dedication and the support of the clinicians that we work with. But we are working really closely with our placement providers. And as you know, now we've prepared for our level 5 placements, a pathway should there be another lockdown, should students need to isolate, etc. And actually at no point did we really need to employ it, because we've all started working so innovatively. Teams have started to react to the situation. So if a clinician had to self-isolate, that didn't impact on the student's placement. They were able to go and work with another clinician. We've worked with teams to develop project ideas to employ should those situations occur or students have to self-isolate. So that maintenance of placement has been key, and we've been, I feel, really successful in managing to do that. The provision of telehealth within placement has increased. There have been challenges with that in terms of ensuring students have the right type of equipment to be able to access those types of placements. Some trusts have fortunately been able to find a pool of money and resources to provide students with laptops and headsets, etc. But that is still a challenge, I think, for some students, and certainly if telehealth is going to stay as a placement provision, we need to sort of look at that and the availability of resources for students to access, because using their own technology, a lot of students aren't able to access trust notes, things like that, to be able to fulfill all their placement requirements. So I think moving forward, that's something that we may need to look at, but certainly some trusts have put that in place and it's been very successful. The students, their feedback has been really positive, and I feel that they feel prepared moving forward into the profession, that they're going to have a unique set of skills to help carry the changes forward that we have. I think there's been some resistance over the years in terms of telehealth, and it's something that we've been a bit scared of doing in speech and language therapy when we look at Australia and America, who have embraced it for a number of years because of the vastness of the countries they have to. But I think the students are going forward with a real great set of skills to be able to move the service forward and continue with that. To support our practice educators, we've shifted our practice educator training online so that we're able to reach far more people and have far more clinical educators attend our training. And we've also, to support our practice educators during this time, created bite-sized sessions. These are informal CPD sessions that our practice educators can come along to. They can problem solve, they can talk about any challenges and issues that they have with placements, and it's a very informal environment. We don't record the session, so it's a safe space for people to talk about things. But as a result of that, we've had some really great sharing of projects between NHS and independent therapists and that networking, and we're hoping to develop that further so that we can collect all these project ideas and the different ways of delivering placement and share them with each other. So overall, placements has been challenging, but at the same time, we've had some really excellent models moving forward. All students now, before they go on placements for level 5 and for level 6, we're able to access COVID testing at BCU. So we're ensuring that our students are sent out to placements safely. And we've also, working with our partners, our students all have SLT uniforms now, which they didn't used to have, and that's been really well received and welcomed. But I think that moving forward in terms of placements, we've had some excellent models and support to enable the continuing education of our students. So yeah, next slide. So this is some of the student feedback that we've had from 3 students. So expressing that they're really grateful for the opportunities that they've had, be that virtual or face-to-face, and that they really appreciated the effort from everybody supporting them on placement. The level 6 student, I don't know if you want to give some feedback about that final student, was that one of yours, Victoria?
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, so we won't read them out, and perhaps we can put them in the chat. But yeah, she just had an absolutely fantastic experience, and she was nominated for an award, and I think because of COVID, sounds awful, but she had a really enhanced, diverse, kind of rich experience in a way. So yeah, she went forward to have an award for kind of innovative practice as a result of her experiences. So yeah. But perhaps we can put some of the quotes in the chat after.
Yeah, you go, Victoria, if you want to.
No, I think we've already touched on some of the things we're going to do moving forward, but I think we obviously will continue to integrate telehealth education into the curriculum in preparation for placements. We're also really now thinking about what needs to be delivered on campus, and actually really much bigger emphasis on a flipped approach to delivery of the curriculum, and perhaps there will be more emphasis on some online delivery moving forward. We're going to continue to collaborate, in innovative ways. There's been lots of people, I know if Claire, you want to add in here, but people who we've worked more closely with, for example, AHP leads for placement, and opportunities to share good practice as a result of the last 12 months. So we will continue to collaborate to grow placement provision and to continue our innovative approach to the curriculum and placement provision. Claire, do you want to?
Yeah, we'll just be sort of continuing to work with our placement providers to, as Victoria said, there is that increase in student numbers, and how we look at different placement models, and also working with other institutions around practice educator training, and looking at how we can adapt that and change elements of that to include simulations and that shift to online practice educator training.
I think that's all, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's hard to condense what we've gone through in the last year to 15 minutes. I've realised how much it was.
But it's just we feel in a very privileged position, and through the support that we've had from our providers. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You managed the time admirably. Very well done. Thank you very much for that overview. It's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot to fit in, and what a year. But I suppose I just want to come in and echo your thanks as another member of the SLT team at BCU for all the work that everybody's put in, for all of our students, for their continued professionalism in managing all of the changes, for our practice partners in responding to everything they're dealing with in the workplace, but also welcoming our students and sharing that learning and sharing that innovation. They are definitely going to be an incredibly resilient bunch that come out to you, coming to work with you in your jobs, having had the experiences that they've had. So next up we have Steve Herman. So Steve is here sharing his perspectives as an expert by experience as a parent of a child who's been receiving services before and throughout the COVID pandemic. And thank you very much for joining us, Steve. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Gillian. Although I didn't realise there were going to be this many people, I have to admit. The PowerPoint's just dropped off and it now looks like an episode of Celebrity Squares, because I can see lots of different faces. So yeah, I hope this is okay. But yeah, thanks for asking me and giving me the opportunity to speak to everybody. And I mean, you guys are the experts, and you do a fantastic job, first of all. So thanks very much. As a parent, everything you guys do, working in the sector, I have kind of, it's a sector I knew absolutely nothing about until, meeting people like Gillian, Peter just over at the RCSLT, and so many people. I could name drop lots of people, but yeah, I knew nothing about the sector until we had Eddie, and he started developing sort of speech and language difficulties. We noticed he wasn't speaking about 18 months to 2 years of age. He's now 5, so fast forward to our COVID experience. Obviously, March 2020, it was frustrating from a parent's point of view, because I felt like I was just starting to meet lots of people, like as say mentioned Gillian and a few other people, I'd started to meet people and get to know more about the sector. At that time, I've been going to a few help groups as well, which was fantastic as a parent, because I think as a parent, you feel like you're the only one going through it. You're the only one who's got a child with speech and language needs, and it's quite a, you know, literally being thrown in the deep end, I guess, and learning about it and not knowing what to do, feeling a bit helpless. So when the pandemic happened, it was just another whirlwind and quite emotional and obviously stressful from a parent point of view. You know, when Gavin Williamson announced that the schools were shutting, I was, because I work on the radio and read the news, and I had to read the news that the schools were shutting, and I was thinking, this is, you know, obviously I couldn't say it on the road, but I was like, this is horrible. What are we going to do about Eddie? And it's been strange, you know. I think the first few months, being honest, it wasn't a fantastic experience. We didn't hear, Eddie's under the Black Country Partnership, he's in the Black Country area, and we didn't hear from the SLT team from March until July. So several months in the first few months of the pandemic. I think, you know, looking back, I think in fairness, obviously it was a whirlwind. Obviously it was a massive adjustment. You know, who knew that Zoom existed this time last year? You know, but it's, I'll get on to the benefits of that very shortly as a parent. But we didn't hear from our SLT team from March to July. We then got a letter in what would have been the last week of term saying, hope you're okay. Is there anything you need? And it was like, yeah, probably a few months ago, yes, but there probably was something that we needed. We kind of carried on regardless. And, you know, I've always said, praise be to Mr. Tumble and Makaton and learning YouTube video. That's literally how I did it, you know, just watching YouTube videos, trying to pick up things from there. There are obviously some great people on Twitter as well. I just jumped on this call when the Herefordshire and Worcestershire guys were on, and I've always said I wish I live 5 miles from the border. I wish I was there because I know you guys do a fantastic job. And I think it was about 2.5 years ago, one of the guys from your team had a 1-hour phone call with me, and you didn't have to do that. So thank you very much for doing that. That was appreciated. But yeah, in terms of our experience going back to COVID, apologies, I've not got a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint to watch. I'm just rambling on, so apologies. Yeah, in terms of our experience, we eventually had I have had a video call in the summer with the SLT department with one of the higher ups at the Black Country Partnership and the team leader to feedback on experience. And this was a couple of years after I'd first contacted my MP about speech and language services, about, you know, how can we improve this? Because the level of support, I didn't feel even back then it was good enough. And 2 and a bit years ago, when I first did that, the response we got was, here's a complaint form. And I have to say, switching to a positive, it's a lot better now. Since that video call, I think they realized that my intentions were never to complain. The intentions are to A, feedback as a parent, and B, work with you guys, and let's work together, you know, and let's improve it together. Yeah, in an ideal world, you know, if there was an endless pot of money, of course, we'd love, you know, daily sessions of speech and language and all sorts of things. But, you know, we live in the real world, and I know that's not the case. But as I say, I think since they kind of came round to the realization that I wasn't working against them, we were working together, it's been fantastic. The previous SLT, who, as I say, we didn't hear from, they've moved on to another job, and the person who's taken it over, Siobhan, has been fantastic. She's on the end of a phone line. We had a Teams video call sort of assessment at home in the July, August, before we went back to school. And as I say, we have regular catch-ups, sort of half-termly catch-ups with her over the phone. And I know I think she's been into school once or twice, which, you know, is the maximum she's been able to. You know, that's through no fault of her own. Excuse me. And she's, as I say, she's been fantastic. I think what we've learned, you know, as I say, no one knew Zoom existed this time last year, and what a tool! Yeah, what a fantastic tool! You know, I think we all got fed up of quizzes very quickly, but in terms of using it productively and working together and doing assessments, it's probably a bit strange, but I genuinely think it's a tool worth keeping. And, you know, if it's one of the benefits of the pandemic has been the introduction of this. You know, how fantastic is it that we can have this conversation like this and have an open conversation and learn lessons, as I say, because it wasn't great at the start, but it has massively improved. Since lockdown 2 in November, I think that was lockdown 2, I've lost count now, Eddie went back to school because we're both, my wife and I are both key workers. She works in a primary school. And again, it sounds really strange, but probably one of the benefits of the pandemic, he went back into school and he went from a class of 15, 16 people, because there's a lot more pressure on special schools now, and they're being made to accept more children, which is a completely separate subject. But he went down from 16 to 4 or 5 in his class. And he has benefited because the staffing levels stayed the same, but the child level went down. And he's had more focus, more support, more one-to-one support, which is exactly what he needed. As well, around December time, we decided to go private and get a private speech and language therapist. Her name's Karen Sheffield. Integrated Therapy Solutions is the company in Worcestershire. And again, she's brilliant. I think we're on session number 5. And I think what it did, it's funny, I feel like what it did for us, going the private route, it's just an extra layer of support. You know, it was nothing against the Black Country Partnership. It was no criticism of their efforts at all. It was just an extra layer of support. And I think what it's done, the therapy sessions with Karen, I feel, are of much a lesson for us as parents. It's actually teaching us what to do. And again, the key has been, ultimately, the whole goal has been to work together. And since then, we've got the school singing from the same hymn sheet as the NHS SLT, the private SLT, and the parents. And that is all we wanted from the start, is for everybody to be singing from the same hymn sheet, doing the same things. Because I'm you know, not sure what the cliche phrase is, preaching to the wise, whatever it is. You know, we're not the experts as parents, but at the same time, there's no point everybody doing something different. And I think for a long time, because of ironically, the lack of communication, I think that's what was happening. And the one benefit of the lockdown it's given us time to assess and work together and look at ideas. And I think finally, you know, as I say, looking back the last 12 months, we are finally on the same page and singing from the same hymn sheet. Rather than me ramble on further, and I apologize, I have put together a bit of a video of Eddie. I put it together this morning, and it was I personally find it quite interesting because it kind of highlighted to me how much of an improvement he's made. You'll see like the date in the corner, the month and the year, and because I do, if people follow me on Twitter, you'll see that I do a lot of videos of Eddie, and it showed to me how much he's progressed, which is fantastic. Best feeling in the world. Sorry. And let me share the screen. And the sound. Here we go. Let's see if this will work. But yeah, it starts in February and moves on to just in the last month or so pretty much a full 12 months. Hopefully you can see it and hear it. Here we go.
1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, Bye.
Old MacDonald had a farm.
E-I-E-I-O. Bye. Done.
Apple. Oh, 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 oh. Orange.
But. Biscuit. Does Eddie some toast? Toast? You want? Okay. Say thank you.
Good boy. Dog. Good boy. Elephant. Good boy.
1, 2, 3.
No, skip.
Hopefully you were able to see that. But yeah, I won't ramble on anymore. But that's just, I guess that's Eddie's story of how he's progressed, and he's independently using words now. And like I said, it's the best feeling in the world. But I'll stop rambling on and just finish by saying once again, thank you for everything you guys do. You're doing amazing work, and you should be all massively proud of what you do, because you are making a difference. But as I say, the most important lesson is let's work together, work together as parents, as therapists, as schools, and for the betterment of our children. And as you can see, what you saw from Eddie is the result of that finally, and it's the best feeling in the world. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Steve. That was absolutely fascinating to watch and listen to. I think we'll all agree, and you probably haven't seen all the comments yet, but there's some very positive comments in the boxes worth having a quick look at. And I think it just highlights how powerful and speech and language therapy can be, and what we can all achieve if we all work as part of a team. And I very much view it as part of a team. Everybody is an equal in playing a part with a child's life, and it's great that you've managed to get to the place where you're feeling happier.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, there's no better feeling in the world than hearing him speak. It's been a long journey, and I think that the thing I'm excited about, though, is fingers crossed, once everything's lifted and we can get meeting up together, if we've been able to achieve that, what you've just seen in the last year during a pandemic, then hopefully we can achieve so much more once again together. But yeah, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to share that. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks very much for your time. Thank you. Right now, everyone, it's time for a little break. We're going to be back at 2:45 prompt. But just to say that we are opening access to the Padlet. Now on there, you can contribute. There's different topic areas that you can type away. If you're not confident in doing that, that's fine, because we have got opportunity later on this afternoon for everyone to go into breakout rooms to actually fill some of the Padlet in. But it's great to have your ideas through the afternoon, really. So that's brilliant. So if everyone wants to, you can turn your cameras off and your mics, and obviously go and have a break. Thank you. Right, we better start back, because obviously time's of the essence this afternoon, to make sure we fit everyone in. Next up is a therapist called Rebecca Panza. And Becky is a speech and language therapist who currently works for an independent speech and language therapy paediatric team, and she also works as an NHS acute speech and language therapist as well. And she's worked throughout the pandemic for both services. So I think Becky has a unique perspective on what has happened from both settings, which is quite unusual. So I'm going to hand over to Becky to hear her experiences.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks very much, Michelle. It's been so great to hear all of your experiences over the last 12 months or so. It's been really insightful. So thank you so much, everyone, for sharing so far. Yeah, as Michelle said, I'm working in both an independent sector and also with adult acute setting as well. So if we go to the next slide, that'd be lovely. So I think with the paediatric side, so I started working at West Midlands Speech and Language Therapy about a year ago now, so just before the pandemic hit. So I've only really known the service during COVID-19. But it's a fabulous service. And then I've also been working with Worcestershire Acute Hospitals NHS Trust. So I work at Worcester Hospital as well as the Alexandra Hospital. I work predominantly with stroke patients, so I'm the stroke lead for speech and language therapy there. And I work part-time at both, so I'm 3 days with adults and 2 days with children. As Michelle said, very politely, very unique. I understand, not a lot of speech therapists do the two, but it's a very varied week, offers a very varied week, which I definitely enjoy. If we go to the next slide. Yeah, so the impact of COVID-19, I'm going to talk about the impact on both services. I'll start with the paediatric service and then I'll move on to the adult setting, because I'll confuse myself if I talk about them both at the same time, let alone anybody else. So I guess, so COVID-19, it's had a huge impact, as we've already heard from speakers, especially in the paediatric setting with school closures. I think especially when the schools first closed, being a part of in the independent sector, obviously we were furloughed as a company, and it was a non-flexible furlough to start with. So it was you could not work, otherwise you wouldn't be furloughed. So it had a major disruption to service to start with, and then obviously the non-flexible furlough that came in, which was great. It meant that we could start doing bits of work. We've been able to make some incredible resources, and we've been able to create some incredible training packages as well for schools and for parents, as well as the children as well, which has been really valuable, actually. And I think the introduction of technology, as we've already touched on today, is huge. I don't think I've done as much CPD with telehealth than I have for anything else over the last year or so, but that's been so beneficial, as we've already heard. I think the introduction of telehealth really helped us as a service to still be able to have that face-to-face contact with children when we weren't allowed in schools, obviously with parents' consent. I think, in terms of access to our service, it's been largely dependent on school closures and reopening of schools as well. As a service, we've tried to be in schools as much as possible. As soon as the government said that we're allowed back in, we try and get back in, obviously with the consent of schools. I think it's largely depended on the responsiveness of schools as well. Understandably, they've had a lot to get their heads around, they've had a lot to organise. So, us being able to go into the schools has been largely dependent on them and what they're comfortable with and what they're happy with. As a service, we've done lots of training in terms of use of PPE and infection control and management to make sure that we're as safe as much as the children and the staff are kept safe as well. But that has meant that obviously we have been able to go into schools when possible with all the correct PPE and with all the infection control. And then I guess I've put clinical versus non-clinical there. I think what I mean really is the face-to-face versus the non-face-to-face contact. I think obviously in the last year or so, we've been more non-face-to-face, perhaps some of us than more face-to-face. I know, a lot of us have been doing a lot of teletherapy and working so hard. but I think it's for me, it's paid a huge, it's really just showed me how much that we can do, you know, when we're not face to face, in terms of how valuable our resources can be, and how valuable, you know, we can be in terms of providing training, and, you know, we can still, you know, reach out to parents, you know, as Steve was talking about earlier, you know, that I think it's been, you know, we've been able to keep in contact with parents and other professionals as well via use of this fabulous technology that we've got. So I think I'm taking that forward, which I'll talk a bit more about in a little bit. But I think just, you know, bringing that into when we're back into schools and when we can see children face to face, I'm definitely going to be more mindful of the other stuff, you know, that the non-face to face stuff, where we can get in touch with parents and staff, and so we're all working as one big unit where possible. And then moving on to the acute side, so very different, I guess. So like I said, I've worked predominantly with stroke patients, and stroke is audited by a programme called SNAP, and they audit stroke units up and down the country. And just really interestingly, they collected some data between the 23rd of March and the 30th of June last year. And their principal findings were that stroke admissions, they fell by 13% during that time, so I guess the first wave, and fewer milder strokes were admitted at the time. They put this down to a variety of factors, one of them being that people didn't actually want to come into hospital because of the scare of COVID. So when people were presenting with milder symptoms, they weren't coming into hospital, is what we found. SNAP actually found that clinical quality, including the therapies, actually improved. So between the March and June first wave last year, that clinical quality improved, and they thought that was down to fewer admissions and likely more hospital beds. I think because at the time the hospitals were trying to get anybody discharged, you know, as safely as possible, which just it led to more beds in the end in that first wave. It's quite a different story now. But yeah, so actually clinical quality improved in that time. And then unfortunately, they did find that obviously the mortality rate increased significantly, and dramatically so if a patient had COVID-19. And I think a lot of that, you know, it's impacted teams, and I know it's impacted our team, the speech therapy team. It's impacted people in a variety of ways, really. I think as a flip side to the paediatric, it's been sort of the clinical, so the face-to-face work, it's been all hands on deck, you know, cancelling all non-urgent meetings, cancelling all non-urgent CPD, even mandatory training, you know, the non-urgent, it's all been cancelled, and it's just been all hands on deck. I think what's probably had the biggest impact on our service during COVID is obviously we've had risk assessed, all our staff have been risk assessed, which has meant that staff, you know, those staff that needed to shield, obviously they've been working from home, and the wards at the hospital, we have COVID wards and non-COVID wards, and certainly throughout the majority of the year there's been much more COVID wards than there have been non-COVID wards, and so the staff that actually weren't able to go on the COVID wards meant that our team shrank dramatically. There was a time where I think there was about 5 of us who could access the COVID wards across 2 hospital sites, and so because of that, we had to change our working model dramatically. So usually we're a service that provide assessment and management of dysphagia and communication difficulties, including therapy as well. But we've actually moved to an assessment only model, whereby we provide initial assessments. If they're a referral with swallowing difficulties, we provide the initial assessment, and we provide recommendations, and we ensure that that patient is stable and safe on those recommendations, and then we actually discharge to our community teams as quickly as possible, more so to help us meet the need of the referrals coming in, but also to move the patients on as quickly as possible as well. We've been very fortunate as a team. I know a few people have touched on, redeployment. We've been very fortunate in that there's no one that has been redeployed, but what we have put big emphasis on is actually helping out in other duties when we're seeing a patient. So a patient, when we're with them, if they're requiring personal care, where it wouldn't usually be our role to help with that, I guess, in the past. Now it's much more, we're expected to chip in, wherever we can, and we do. And something else we've been working on as well is also inserting nasogastric tubes for our patients who are nil by mouth, and we've been responding to bleeps to help out the nurses when they're looking after more vulnerable and more poorly patients. We are responsive to a bleep to help put down nasogastric tubes. Obviously, just to free more time for the ward staff wherever possible. So our role definitely has changed in some ways, but then we've been very fortunate in other ways that we've been able to stick to our role as a speech and language therapist and not redeployed elsewhere. And then where we are now. So in my paediatric role, obviously I wrote this PowerPoint when we were waiting for a date for schools to reopen, but we've got a date now, so that as of next week we'll be back into the schools, obviously dependent on schools' permission, but we're all very excited to be going back into schools and having our face-to-face sessions. We won't be working, I guess we will be working from home if required, if the schools aren't happy to have us in. But obviously we've got the teletherapy all set up now for schools if that is the case. So hopefully it shouldn't affect us too much. We've been doing some weekly CPD opportunities while we have been working at home, which have been fantastic, and building on resources, which I've mentioned before. It's been brilliant. So I think, I'm really very much looking forward to, I guess, the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, if we can get back in the schools, which should be great. And then with with the adult setting, very much not really much has changed as for what I've mentioned. So caseloads, they've remained merged. We're still on an assessment only model for those patients who are stable on recommendations, obviously still providing an ongoing service for patients who are nil by mouth, requiring extra support. And COVID numbers are slowly reducing, which is excellent news. And we're seeing a slow reintroduction of non-clinical duties and project work and things, which is great. I think, as I've mentioned, what I'm taking forward with both in both settings really is as Steve mentioned, it's the use of technology. I think we'd all agree with that. I saw us all nodding along with that. When it works, I think it's fabulous. And, we've been able to still keep in touch and touch base with all of our teams, which has been invaluable, really. And I think using that going forward is really positive, and it's a really positive thing for our profession. I also, I feel really proud to be a speech therapist, especially throughout this year, and I'm definitely taking that going forward in terms of what we can do and what we can achieve, even in the midst of a pandemic. So yeah, I think that's everything from me. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Becky. That was great. I think it gives a really, as I say, unique perspective into both of those roles because they're so different, and the response during the pandemic has been so different as well to your role. So that was fascinating. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Next, I'm going to introduce Hannah. Hannah is one of the chairs for the West Midlands Hub, as well as being a speech language therapist, and she's here to talk a little bit about her experience during COVID within her NHS trust. So I'll hand over to Hannah now.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. It's great to see so many of you here today. I am here just to talk about my experience of redeployment. So I'm a community speech and language therapist for adults for Samwell. And our redeployment started last March, and it's always been on a voluntary basis, whereby we were asked last March if any of our team wanted to be redeployed to do the COVID testing, redeployed to the adult, the acute hospitals, and most recently vaccinating for COVID. So I have done the COVID swabbing, and I've done a video about a day in the life of what that's like. And I also have a video of my colleague Rabia, who volunteered to be redeployed to the acute setting. And I think a lot of us as speech therapists in our community team have recently undertaken the vaccinating opportunity. So last week was my first day vaccinating, which was a great experience, seeing as I've never vaccinated before. But I think a lot of us are taking the opportunities thrown at us, which is great.
Hi, I'm Rabia. I'm a speech and language therapist working within the iCares community team in Sandwell. A bit of background about myself. So when I graduated from university, my first role was working with adults with learning disabilities in the community. It was great, I really enjoyed it, but I was really keen to get some more experience, particularly in an adult acquired caseload. So that's when I came to the iCares team just over a year ago now. So it's a massive learning curve for me, A, being a new band 6, and B, having a completely new caseload, but I've really settled in and really thoroughly enjoying it.
What was the response to COVID-19 and your experience of redeployment?
In the community, we changed the way that we see patients. So we're only seeing urgent/high priority ones who had urgent swallowing or communication needs. At the same time, our acute therapists in the hospitals had an increase in referrals and needed a bit more support. So I, along with another colleague of mine, have been redeployed to help out on the acute wards. And it's been a massive adjustment getting used to the fast-paced environment and the different ways of working and managing patients, but I've really been enjoying it.
And how did your redeployment impact on community speech and language therapy services?
So with my current redeployment, I'm spending the first half of the week in the acute hospitals, and I'm spending the latter week in the community. So when I am returning to community, I'm just monitoring my patients, supporting them virtually via WebEx calls or telephone calls, or having to arrange urgent visits to go out and see them. So it has made things a bit more difficult to juggle, but we've got a really supportive team and really good response times.
Good morning, it's 7:30 and I'm just on my way to do a day of swabbing. The good thing about swabbing is it's a new location, so it's not my usual community base, it's at the local hospital, which I can walk to. So armed with coffee, of course. We've got a pretty full day today, so I thought I'd get some fresh air before we start. Just doing a drop of the COVID swabs that we've done. So we take them to the pathology lab to get tested. Okay, so we have just done our morning and it's been quite busy. We've swabbed a mixture of patients and staff, so yeah, glad to be on our lunch break. I'm home and I'm dry. Yeah, I wasn't quite anticipating that change in weather. Okay, so I'm really sorry that you didn't get to see much of my day. It was just really busy, confidentiality reasons, data protection, but there's 2 of us working. We have a live patient list. These individuals can be patients going to procedures, staff members and staff members' families. So we get all our swabs ready, get our PPE ready, and then the drive-through opens. They come round, we swab, and we have a separate section to doff off, get the swab ready, as you saw, trips to pathology. We never know the result of the individual. That's between path lab and them. And then throughout the day, we're also cleaning. So I had a really good day today, even though it's busy. I love the redeployment, and I'm really glad I volunteered for the opportunity. I feel like I've learnt loads. I'm working with individuals I would never normally work with. I'm meeting individuals I'd never normally work with. I'm learning about the trust. I'm on a different site, seeing the hospital, learning about like pathology labs, COVID, PPE, and yeah, learning a lot. Now, I'm sure most of you are sat there thinking, what about your caseload? And of course, I think about that all the time. I don't want to put any pressure on the speech therapy team. I try to be as accessible as possible. I've got my work phone, my email, they know to call me whenever. And I'm only redeployed 2 days a week. So the other days I'm back in, we're offering virtual visits, and we're trying to limit home visits as much as possible, which means less travel time, more time to spend ringing our patients. I'm really lucky I have such a supportive SLT team, and we do, you know, have weekend working, and we do have access to, if one of my patients really needs a visit and I'm not there, for a lovely colleague to do that triage for me. So really supportive team. We're all doing our best. I think at the moment it's working. I mean, it might change by the time you see this video, but at the moment we're all doing our best to try and support with the COVID battle.
Well, that's always embarrassing watching yourself back there. I hope that worked for you, because it wasn't really playing. So I hope you got a little insight into a day in the life of redeployment. I also have some feedback from the clinical lead of the COVID testing as well. I interviewed her, but she didn't want to be on the screen. So I'm sorry, thank you, Nasha. I've sent that in the link. Joanne Tonks is the clinical lead for the COVID swabbing team for the last year, and she was also redeployed. She's an osteoporosis nurse. And sorry, I can see all the comments coming through. So it's really interesting insight into her redeployment, as well as how she benefits from AHPs freeing up nurses, so nurses can go onto the wards, and us as speech therapists step in to kind of bridge that gap. But yeah, it's been a brilliant experience, and it's very different to speech therapy. Last week it was quite difficult because I was a speech therapist on Tuesday, a vaccinated Wednesday, and then I was doing the COVID swabbing the following day. So it's quite a lot of heads to juggle. But it's been a great opportunity.
Thank you, Hannah. That was really fascinating. I love that. That was really different.
Thanks.
Next, I'm going to hand over to Sophia. Sophia is in the Hub team as well, and she's going to talk a little bit from an adult learning disability perspective with her colleague, but I'll let her do the introductions.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you're enjoying the presentation so far. I'm Sophia Sheikh. I'm a speech and language therapist, and I work with adults with learning disabilities in the community. And I have been recently seconded to work in the community forensic team as well, in the Birmingham Community Healthcare. And I'm co-presenting with my colleague, Amy Bates, who is also a speech therapist, and she's working with adults with learning disability in the intensive support team. And she has been seconded to a modern matron role since April 2020. Yeah. And today we're going to just talk about the changes from the ALD perspective. So I'm going to hand over to Amy to give you an overview.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So So we're just going to give you a bit of a rundown of what our LD service looked like pre-COVID, and then talk you through some of the changes that happened in wave 1, wave 2 and wave 3, because 2 and 3 kind of came together for us. We'll have a think about what our speech and language therapy service looked like throughout COVID and how it's changed, how we changed our practice, how we changed adapting assessment, intervention, etc. for both communication and dysphagia. And we'd like to celebrate some of the good practice and challenges and learning that we've come across over the last 12 months. And also finally, just to summarise on some of the new roles that we've been able to undertake as speech and language therapists throughout the pandemic and throughout the response. So Sophia's going to talk to us about the pre-COVID service.
Some background information to how our LD services work in Birmingham. We have 3 community hubs, which is based in North, South and Central across Birmingham. We have a community forensic team, which works citywide. And then we have an intensive support team, which is citywide as well. And some of the, which is the learning disability criteria, what we accept referrals from the person who is like age 19 plus or within the 6 weeks of the 19th birthday. The referral should say that they should have a significant health need that can't be met through the mainstream health services as well. The person should be on the GP register as having a learning disability diagnosis. What we exclude is referrals having just learning difficulties or dyslexia or sole autism as well. We signpost them to the appropriate services. Next slide, please. Pre-COVID, how we operated, in the community, we had 3 weekly hub referral meetings, and the SLT used to be representing at the meetings. We accepted referrals from external sources and internal from the MDT colleagues as well. The SLT worked across all the 3 hubs, and we had no postcode barriers. The referrals came in, we accepted it, and we worked citywide as well. SLT team prioritized communication and dysphagia referrals to manage both risks and the waiting times as well. And we had weekly screening and allocations for referrals based on staff capacity. SLT in the IST integrated into the MDT, and they also input into the entire caseload as and when required. Similarly, with the SLT in the CFT integrated into the whole MDT, and the input was into the entire caseload as required. Generally, SLT team as a whole, we had monthly SLT professional forums, which we continued as well during COVID as well. And then we had access to regular clinical supervision, reflective practice and peer supervision, which we continued during COVID period as well. And then SLT representation at the clinical reference group to influence patient care pathway. We have some clinical reference group such as dysphagia and nutrition support, epilepsy, challenging behavior, mental health, forensic CRG and autism as well. The CRG is basically a group of health professionals who have come together with the aim of developing pathways and guidance to promote best practice throughout the LD team. And this is in order to keep the service up to date with new developments in patients' experience, patient safety, audits, and research as well. Next slide, please.
Thanks. So for wave 1, obviously the pandemic took us all by surprise, and it meant that every service had to adapt and change, and the learning disability service was no different. We were heavily pulled on in terms of redeployments to other areas across both our trust, but also the system across the Birmingham Solihull region. And so it meant that there was some immediate changes to learning disability services and how that worked. We ended up having significant changes to our service provision. Initially, all cases that were open to the MDT, regardless of discipline, were RAG rated as either critical, essential or maintenance. And our staff teams were redeployed into these areas. So much of our critical work around maintaining input for service users maintained critical. So we had a group of speech therapists within the critical team. We had a group of speech therapists within the essential team. And then we had some of our support staff in the maintenance team. We also developed new teams within our service as part of the Wave 1 response, and that was to develop a triage team so that all referrals coming into the LD service were triaged by the same group of people with the same criteria to establish who was critical, who was essential, and who was maybe could be picked up at a later point, so put on a maintenance caseload kind of to ring and check if there was any changes. As part of the Wave 1 response, we also were asked to support a care homes team across the Birmingham Solihull region, and that was a completely new service. We also were asked to support our acute hospital colleagues by providing learning disability liaison nurses to support learning disability service users in hospitals, which isn't something that we delivered for a very long time, so we were kind of moving backwards in that way. As part of redeployment, we also had some of our speech therapists redeployed into other divisions. So people took on family liaison officer roles, they were redeployed to wards or early intervention community teams, stroke wards, etc. There's lots of redeployment. We moved from having 3 citywide hubs to having 1 citywide team, or sorry, three hubs in North, South and Central to having 1 citywide team. And instead of having weekly hub meetings for each of those North, South and Central, we had a daily MDT meeting to discuss and respond to referrals. All of our referrals came through. They were either allocated to critical, essential or maintenance. If they were critical, they maintained their MDT around them. They usually sat within the intensive support team or the community forensic team. For essential service users, they were allocated usually to 1 care coordinator as a member of staff. So sometimes that was speech and language therapist, other times it might have been a psychiatrist or a nurse, and it was about kind of the primary need or the primary reason for a referral into the multidisciplinary team. And that person was able to offer specific input and advice as a first line, and if things became critical, they could always escalate it to the full MDT through our daily MDT to have a wider input. And then our maintenance cases were kind of contacted approximately once a month. They might have been people who had recommendations in place that we were just finishing up input with, or actually they were prioritised as, yes, there is a need there and we don't want to lose those people, but actually they're not critical at this point in time. So they were contacted more on a bit of a monthly basis to check their well-being, check if anything had changed, check if their risk levels had changed. So as I mentioned, we developed new functions. So we had a care home team, we had a triage team, we had our acute health facilitation and liaison teams. And unfortunately, as part of the initial response, our respite services and day services closed, which was a big loss to some of our service users. And we didn't recover them for a very, very, very long time. We then, I suppose, maintained this over the next few months. And from March probably till June, and we began to recover services in June, but we still held kind of that critical, essential and maintenance caseloads as staff began to come back. And then Wave 2 hit us. So Wave 2, again, there was further change. We created a duty team, we created a physical health team. We maintained our community forensic team, but our citywide and intensive support team merged to become a COVID critical team across Birmingham for people with learning disabilities. And within that, what we were able to deliver based on staff availability and capacity changed. So the division came up with some COVID critical functions, and it was all around preventing hospital admission. It was about supporting any crisis or crisis management. It was about maintaining our legal obligations. So for service users who'd been previously sectioned, maybe had 117 aftercare in place or were on care programme approach, to carry out mental capacity acts and to fulfil court orders. And this was because of the significantly reduced capacity within the service at the time. We only then worked with cases that were rated as high risk or critical on our RAG. Everything else, unfortunately, has kind of been on a waiting list for all of the cases. And that's been really difficult for us all to get used to, having this waiting list of where we know there's need, we know there's risk, but actually we don't have capacity to be able to pick that up. One way of trying to support that is we introduced a clinical harms process. So all service users were assessed against the critical functions. Their risk level was assessed, their individual circumstances and what interventions each service user needed was addressed, and also the length of time that they've been waiting without intervention from our service. And that has meant that hopefully everyone will be reviewed at least every 48 weeks, which feels like a very long time. And it is a very long time. But actually it means that we review things at least every 48 weeks as a service to check, has anything changed? Are they okay to still wait, or do we need to increase our service response? So Sophia's going to talk to you specifically about speech language therapy through it.
Yeah, basically the communication and dysphagia was split, and it felt like dysphagia was felt to be critical, no matter what the risk level was for the service user. And we kind of prioritize usual level of prioritization was implemented for dysphagia cases. For communication cases, it was prioritized based on the clinical need and the risk. And under the red category, we were looking at the risk of placement breakdown. For example, the service provider was not able to support the service user. There was increase in inpatient admission to hospital, either in acute or mental health units. There was increased vulnerability and safeguarding issues, and looking at the offending behaviors, increased behaviors of concerns, increased injury or distress for service user, family and carers. They were categorized as red and essential and critical. The one under the amber category was increased anxiety and distress for people with learning disability and the families and carers. People not making informed decision due to communication needs. For example, lack of information in easy accessible format, easy read formats as well. There was increased vulnerability in service users living at family home and have no access to day center and respite. And there were lower standards of healthcare received as communication needs are not adequately addressed. Under the green category, we looked at reasonable adjustment not being made in the community. People with communication and learning disabilities were unable to access job opportunities, and then failure to meet legal requirements of Human Rights Act and Disabilities Discrimination Act. Next slide.
So we changed our practice much like everybody else has had to, and that was really around the introduction of virtual working. All staff overnight went from working in offices and working on face-to-face assessments and interventions to working from home using trust laptops and mobile phones, and we were really well supported with that in the initial stages. Everyone was supported to have access to a mobile phone and a laptop with cameras, so we changed things around being able to have access to WhatsApp, where we previously wouldn't have been able to utilize WhatsApp on our work phones. They allowed us to have access to it. We have trained as a trust a license to use Attend Anywhere software, which offers virtual appointments, which has obviously been a game changer in some ways. We initially began using WebEx as our platform for internal meetings, and that replaced any face-to-face meetings. And subsequently, after that initial time with WebEx, we moved to MS Teams, much like the rest of the NHS, it probably seems. One of our key elements of change is that our admin remained at our bases, and that became vital to how we delivered our services, because while staff were working from home, we still needed to be able to send out resources, thickener, supportive material, guidelines, etc. And staff, our admin staff supporting us were really, really important in doing that, and they remained at base to be able to do that, which was really vital.
Some of the changes that happened to dysphagia is a small set of clinicians were redeployed to the physical health team, just looking at the dysphagia referrals and managing the dysphagia caseload citywide. There was a duty clinician each day to triage any new referrals that came to the dysphagia service. A prioritization phone call was established to decide the level of risk, and the referrals were grouped into red, amber and green to manage capacity and in the team, and to also ensure the highest risk cases are seen first. A first line advice was provided at the prioritization call, and we looked at providing additional information around risk management, such as sending letters to the GP, prescription requests or making onward referrals were all made at this point. The red cases were allocated immediately to the clinician, while the amber and green cases were allocated based on the capacity within the dysphagia team. Once a case was allocated to a clinician, we followed the usual process of assessment and providing any interventions. Although this was done virtually, face-to-face visits were offered and risk assessed as required.
I'm really aware of time actually, so I'm just going to run over this really quickly. So in terms of communication, we've already mentioned that everything was RAG rated, and we continued to offer face-to-face input for any RAG rated that was required on a face-to-face basis, and everything else kind of moved virtually. Our amber interventions tended to be more consultative and lots of MDT indirect working with service users, staff, family carers, etc. Virtually, and then green, like I said, they remained on our waiting list until capacity allowed us to resume intervention or their risk level changed, and they were monitored via phone calls. We move on.
Some of the good practice and the learning was we as clinicians were adapting to new situation and transferring skills and abilities, and we continue to deliver quality care by using the Attend Anywhere, offering virtual appointments. We used the most popular social media platform, WhatsApp, making both audio and video calls for assessment, observation, and even to offer support and contact as well. And then in terms of dysphagia, we requested some video clips via our nhs.net account to do the observation, and then so that the eating and drinking guidelines can be put in place as well. And then we continue to offer face-to-face assessment as required. In terms of interventions, we requested admin staff to send us the equipments like thickener or spoons or beakers, whatever is needed, eating and drinking guidelines, any reports. So that was done. We continue to offer virtual training, for example, Makaton training sessions, dysphagia training to the family and carers as well. We use Attend Anywhere to carry out virtual appointments, do MDT reviews, and we do the CPA meetings as well. In terms of information and advice leaflet, we also sent out leaflets and signposting. We use multimedia approach, YouTube and other services. We also use RCSLT website, what was available, the resources available. We use that to send the information out. And again, we offered face-to-face assessment, and interventions were carried out were deemed essential and critical. Some of the practical things was we had the clinician who were redeployed to the dysphagia team. They had access to the PPE, and they were mask fit tested as well. So FFP3 was available for all dysphagia assessment if a face-to-face visit was essential. We had access to gloves, mask, apron, eye protection in line with the trust guidelines for all face-to-face visits. And we had access to transparent mask as well for communication assessment. We also use YouTube video links for training and creating awareness. We explored and followed Twitter to gather and share good practice. We developed new advice leaflet, for example, how to modify high-risk food or offer alternatives. We also use ITSE website resources, for example, food ideas and restriction leaflets. We were able to post out or email it to the family carers. We also looked at easy read guidance. Leaflets were developed an easy accessible format for COVID information regarding rules and the testing, and they had to be constantly updated due to the high turnover and with frequent changes as well. And looking varied ways of working with admin support who were on site as we were working. In terms of support, how we SLT did, we offered wider support to the other MDTs. There was a high level of desire to continue MDT approach within the LD service. We clinicians were keen to avoid any silo working. We were keen to share changes in practice as well. We had daily MDT meeting, and therefore it was easier to access to the MDT. Increased scope to take on generic roles. be less boundaried by what is it that each discipline does. For example, SLT offering supported the community nurse and the psychology by completing behavior assessment with their guidance and support. We did lots of networking locally within the trust across divisions. For example, we liaised with the PEDS, community and acute setting. We also did the regional networking with other trusts in the region, and we looked at Twitter for national and international engagement to see how other services were functioning.
So I think in summary, we had lots of really positive experiences, but we also had some challenges. Some of the real key things were people working outside of their comfort zones. For example, when they were redeployed, never worked in stroke before, but all of a sudden that's what they were expected to do. This still is some difficulties with regards to being split across the communication and dysphagia teams. We're all speech therapists, we're all trained in both areas, and we'd all like to be able to do those two things, but at the moment we're split. And that's something we want to move away from as we recover. We've had to change from moving from individual hubs into one citywide service. I think we're all a bit tired at this point, and that's becoming a challenge. The ability to kind of cope and react to staff sickness and capacity, particularly if somebody all of a sudden needs to isolate, that's been a challenge. I think we've also kind of touched on as a division not feeling adequate or able to deliver what we would usually deliver, and that's felt uncomfortable for us and a change in practice. And then sometimes that maybe we were being asked to fill gaps and vacancies in other service areas that were gaps rather than service deficiencies due to COVID. So we've had lots of learning. Actually, we've been really good at transferring our skills. We've been really good at taking on more generic working, not just being really boundaried about this is what I do as a speech and language therapist. We know we're really keen to be one team. Actually, we're really resilient and positive, and we still want to deliver a great service. And we want to drive to improve based on the learning we've had rather than go back to the way it was. I think our final slide is just to also recognise that our speech therapists have taken on amazing different roles throughout the pandemic. So we have currently got a speech language therapist as a clinical operations manager. I'm in the post as a matron. We have a speech therapist undertaking their ACP. We have speech language therapists across our triage team, duty team, and also during crisis response. And I think as a division, we've learned that every opportunity is an opportunity for learning, which has been really positive. Sorry, we've run over. And that's it.
Thank you very much. That was really good. It was great to see how you'd use the rag rating, because that's very different from any of the other presentations we've had, and that was really insightful. So thank you. I'm sure people have taken a lot away with them from that. Right, well, we're reaching towards the end now of our day, which has been an action-packed, afternoon. I think in summary, we've learnt lots of different approaches, and it's been really insightful just listening to everyone's perspectives. So to summarise everything, we've got Andrea Robinson, who is the RCSLT, I can't speak now, England trustee and head of therapy and assessment service at Dawn House School, which I'm sure most paediatric people have heard of. So I'll hand over to Andrea, and just a quick reminder, as it will finish when Andrea finishes. Just a quick reminder to do an evaluation form or put some notes in the chat. That'd be great. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, thank you so much for your contributions today and for allowing me to be part of it. I've really enjoyed it. And please excuse the photo, it's not quite as glamorous as Cameron's was at the beginning. It looks a bit stretched now, but anyway, I'll work on that, could do better. So my hub involvement really, it started about 10 years ago when Giving Voice was also launching, and also, you know, and I was also part of the steering group for the East Midlands Hub as well, so I do know how much hard work goes into the planning and how many meetings you have to have for a day like today. And that was sort of pre-COVID, so you know, I can't begin to imagine really how you've pulled all this together so well. It's been amazing and extremely inspiring, so thank you so much for that. So I think, go on to the next slide, Kaylee. So I think what I take away from today really is no matter what sector we work in, this pandemic has affected all of us really. So SLTs, the managers, patients, carers, parents, and supporting staff and other professionals who we work with. So today's been such an array of different experiences really, but with common themes. So things like prioritising our workloads according to which clinical areas we're in. So embracing the opportunities, sort of, you know, swabbing and diversifying what we're doing really. Teletherapy as well has been a huge influence, and using online platforms as well. So also sort of having resilience and adaptability, courage to change and innovative in our practice, and also collaborating and working or redesigning services. In fact, we've all done that so speedily and sort of got straight there and in with it all. So in fact, there are also the silver linings, which are so often clouded, aren't they, by our day-to-day busyness of the work that we do, but it's so important to take this time today to celebrate this by holding these type of events. And it's also been so important to include Steve talking about Eddie today. So a massive heartfelt thanks to him for sharing his journey. I did have a tear in my eyes as this sort of video was shown, so that was a fantastic, and thank you so much goes to him as well. So if I may, I'd like to thank specific presenters from today. So we've got obviously Kamini, first of all, we had Emma, Victoria, Claire, Steve, Rebecca, Hannah, Sophia and Amy. And we've got the steering group members as well. As I say, I appreciate how hard you've all worked too. So that's obviously Michelle Turner, thank you for sharing this today. We had Claire Johnson, Fiona Wilcox, Gillian Rudd, Hannah Cowles, Helen Jenkins, Jenny Fraser, Megan David, Ruth Freeman, Sam Hawksford and Sophia Sheik. And I believe there is a evaluation survey to fill in as well. So please fill in the evaluation survey. It will only take a few minutes and is really important that we get that feedback just for sort of planning forward and future meetings really. So lastly, thanks for taking this visual tour with us all today. So it's difficult to be a part, you know, during these difficult times, but we hope we've offered the opportunity to network, be inspired by what you've learnt and shared learning. So thank you so much to everybody, and please do engage with the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists whenever you can. There's always so many projects, if you heard from Kamini earlier, so many projects and things going on that you can just tap into, and you know, you can kind of be a lurker a little bit on one of the groups for, or you could sort of take it, you know, a little bit further as ever, you know, whatever you can fit in really, even if it's watching a webinar, which is so important to kind of do as well, just making that time for yourselves. So just to finish really, just Mary Heritage, our new chair of the Royal College of Speech and Language Trustees, has just said, mentioned the other day that the Royal College is kind of ... and it's all about us. So again, just please remember that and get involved, and thank you again for coming. And I would say drive carefully, but I think most of you are at home. So thank you, and go and have a cup of tea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Right then, bye.
Thank you, everyone.